the impact of social media and streaming platforms.
Hello, my name is Michael Caselli, and it is great to be here. I'm the chairman of Clarion Gaming, and to my right I have Dan Shannon from Casino Kings and Mark Grech from Pyaza. Am I saying it right? I should have asked you before. Pyaza, yes, I thought so. And we're here to talk about the impact of social media and streaming platforms. Now, we've only got 15 minutes to do it. I love that that we only have 15 minutes because it means you're only going to get the facts. There's going to be no nonsense here. When we practiced, it was 20. Now we have to condense it to 15, and you're going to get the hard hit with the truth. So I want to start by asking Dan a little bit about what he's doing right now on, of all platforms, Snapchat, and why.
Yeah, so hi Michael. So we've just launched our brand called Casino Kings. It was a 10-year-old brand. We've literally just bought it. And one of the things we were looking at when we were looking at the player data was the age range of the current customers on that base. And what we realized quite quickly was the age range was quite like, we were looking around 40 to 60. So it's quite an old base of it on there. And what we want to do as a marketing campaign was to maybe get a younger base. At the same time, we're launching a sports book, and we know sports players are generally from the age around 20 to 40. So one of the main things we started looking at was maybe looking the traditional ways, PPC and stuff like that, the standard ways, but to look at Snapchat and see how we could leverage that and see how we could potentially get them players on board. So what we've done is we looked at doing regional campaigns across the UK. We started in Manchester. There was a game, Manchester United versus Tottenham game. We've done loads of sponsorship around the game, but we've done a really heavy hit on Snapchat, on the adverts all through that week, basically hitting people from the ages of 20 to 35, male range, in the Manchester and North West area of the UK. So we really hit that just to see just to get a better understanding whether Snapchat's more of a conversion tool or a brand awareness tool. And what we figured out, basically off doing all these regional campaigns, was Snapchat doesn't really convert as well as PPC or your original standard legacy ones. But as a brand awareness tool, to get eyes on the brand, it was doing a fantastic job. So that was the main reason with Snapchat, what we started looking at doing.
Now, listen to this, all brand managers. How insane would it be if one of your staff came to you and said, well, we have no direct way of monitoring how many people are going to come through, and it's sort of a branding exercise, and we're going to do it on Snapchat. And that's my initial reaction when Dan told me about what they're doing and how successful it is. But explain, because it's so important, why the regionalization and the ability to track players by region, essentially how you did it and why you know it's working, why you know your Snapchat campaigns are working by regionalizing the advertising.
Of course, so what we'd be looking at is we'd be looking at the impressions which the adverts are getting, and then we would be looking at the click-through rate, and seeing how many people are clicking on our landing page, and then how many people from that landing page is going through and actually converting to there. But what we did notice, and obviously we discussed the other week, was there was lots of clicks coming through, but with Snapchat, when you advertise on like Spotlight, for example, which we were advertising on, unlike PPC, where people are searching for a branded keyword, people are on their social media scrolling through videos. They're not necessarily looking for an gambling advert or sports advert. They're socially scrolling. So basically, some people are coming across it by mistake, clicking on it by mistake, so them click-throughs can't be counted. So what we'd be looking at is basically how many people registered over that period, which it was fairly low, and that's how we realized that brand awareness is much better. But we'll go into numbers near the end, but we noticed about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, the organic traffic, the SEO, in the Manchester area had spiked compared to other trends over the past 3 or 4, 6 months. So that indicated to us that people had seen the brand on Snapchat, not necessarily interacted straight away, but come back 3 weeks, 2 weeks later organically searching for us, and then basically signed up. The alternative thing we could have potentially done was stick a code on there, a special code, and that potentially could attract better. But we've noticed when we've done campaigns in Manchester, Nottingham, Glasgow, the same trends. 2 to 3 weeks later, we'd see an organic spike in SEO traffic and for the search for our brand keyword, Casino Kings.
Now, Dan, I'm going to hit you later for some numbers, but I want to get over to Mark. But just how timid am I? I actually couldn't even imagine going to my marketing department and being like, listen, go do this thing. We'll track it maybe regionally because we don't have that many people coming from this area. And then in 3 or 4 weeks, we'll see if it worked out. I mean, it's just incredibly brave. And I do want to dig into those numbers. But first, I want to ask Mark what your approach is, because you're kind of coming at streaming platforms from a different angle and your social platforms from a different angle, and you're actually creating your own. So can you tell us about that?
So yeah, no, to continue on then, streaming and even utilizing social media is pretty much similar to SEO, as we were mentioning. You know, it takes time to rank and get yourself out there, your brand organically. So nowadays, I believe that it's always important that our marketing budgets needs to be split up, not just on the traditional side of marketing, you know, like paid performance marketing, SEO, content-wise, and so on. But we need to even tap into streaming, looking at influencers to put out our brand. You know, it's a fact nowadays that in certain markets, if you don't have influencers on the ground, a good example is Brazil. You need influencers, streamers speaking about your brand in order to penetrate well the market. On the other hand, I believe as well that it's very important that we need to think ahead and reach out to different audiences, especially future generations. You know, everyone is looking into streamers and influencers. The biggest brands in iGaming, I would say, is mainly pushed by streamers and influencers. So I do believe that we need to look into new initiatives rather just focusing on the traditional side. Again, it's important to have SEO, it's important to have marketing and social media running around, but we need to look at the markets that we're looking into penetrating and obviously understand and set up budgets in order to get what we really want to push out there as a brand.
So you've mentioned that Brazil's an important market for influencers. Do you think that every market requires influencers, or do you think some of the more established markets don't?
Eventually, nowadays, I believe yes. Because again, new generations behind us, everyone is into streaming, especially people that are coming from esports, that are into gaming, even people that are into crypto. All brands are all pumping up streaming, influencers, everyone is speaking about the brand. Nowadays, we can see famous people playing live casinos. Reason why we're seeing a huge influx when it comes to playing traditional like blackjack, roulette, and even from a younger age, where before it was more, I would say, of a mature audience playing live casino, but nowadays, you know, seeing these popular artists all playing ahead, so people are following up. And again, in order to compete against all your competitors, it's important to tap into these areas.
And Mark, do you have some numbers to kind of back up the assertions? Can you tell me why it's more efficient to go with an influencer or to go with a social platform than your standard PPC? I know you're adding it into the mix. Tell me why. Tell me what the numbers play out to be.
So yeah, eventually again, looking at SEO, it's important to have, but if you're gonna have an influencer or people streaming, and let's say nowadays popular streamers and influencers have millions of followers, you know, if you combine and look into the numbers, eventually your brand is gonna get more out there. Yes, you need to be doing your homework pretty well and not just shooting in the air and just choosing multiple influencers to push your brand. Even something important to mention is that when we have influencers advertising our brands, it's important not to push it that much. What I mean is that nowadays we see that streamers are putting out content which is always wins, funds, and building communities, socializing. You know, it's only the nice side of the gambling. Eventually we need to be realistic. You know, we need to think about responsible gambling, as Dan was mentioning eventually as well, like advertising in the UK. Responsible gambling is key. So you cannot just put up jackpots, winning bonuses, and so on. You know, we need to be realistic, especially for younger generations.
Dan, that's a really good follow-up idea. You talked about branding and branding being the important aspect of what you're doing more than anything else. But of course, as Mark just said, in the UK, you have a lot of responsible gambling advertising that needs to go in there. Is that crippling the ads? Is that making them less effective? Or is the branding still just as effective, even when you put in all of the responsible gambling information?
It's a tricky one. So in terms of Snapchat, you've got roughly around a 2 to 4 second window for them to grab their attention, because like I said, they've not asked to be shown a casino advert. It's just popping up on the feed. So you've got that 2 second window, but when you're doing the advert, because we're under the UK Gambling Commission, you have to get the terms and conditions on what advert you're doing, and you need to have Be Gamble Aware on there. So that's really important, because otherwise you're gonna end up with a fine. But equally as important, you need to grab the person's attention, and you've only got 2 to 3 seconds to do that. So you don't want to be too vanilla and just go, okay, Gambling Commission, let's just do a standard advert, because it won't convert. So you need to find that fine line of like something which is going to grab their attention, but also fall in line where the Gambling Commission cannot slap a fine on you.
I guess, but what I'm drilling into is, do you think that the responsible gambling information denigrates the branding or the effectiveness of the advertisement? Or do you think the ads work just as well when you have that information in them?
It depends what kind of information they want on there. So for certain things, they want the full terms and conditions. In that case, yes, that does cause an issue with advert, because if it's a video, it could take the bottom fold up, or you've only got like certain levels of folds. So if you've got to stick a big like blurb of text on there, that's an issue. Be Gamble Aware on there, no issue at all. You can stick that bottom left, no bottom right. But it just depends what type of advert you're running and what kind of terms and conditions which need to be on that.
I mean, I asked the question because I've often asked television advertisers in the UK why they're putting adverts up that essentially say, please don't come and gamble, whatever you do. And the answer is generally, it's a branding exercise, and it actually works just as well for our branding if we're saying gamble or don't gamble.
Well, we done a billboard outside the Manchester United Stadium. It's the biggest billboard in the UK, and we had the biggest terms and conditions in the UK. They were huge. So.
Yeah, that's fun. Now, I promised some numbers. Can you guys provide me some numbers of the effectiveness of your social campaigns? Stan, I want to start with you.
Yeah, so for our campaign where we ran in Manchester, for the first one, we had 66,000 impressions on there for roughly around a £5,000 spend. So £5,000, 66,000 impressions. Through that, we had 21,000 click-throughs. So basically 30% of that was a click-through. And then off the top of that, we had around 14 first-time depositors off the back of that. So when we've collected the data off other legacy campaigns, we would have made more FTDs, potentially doing it that way. But as I mentioned in the conversation, organically, we've seen a spike 2 or 3 weeks later, which basically brings them both in line with each other, really.
I mean, that's huge. Now, are you noticing a big discrepancy in different creatives? Your different creative advertising? Are some creatives more effective than others to a vast amount? Or are you finding that anything that's branded is working almost equally as well?
Pretty much, yeah. Not much different, yeah.
That's amazing. And how about yourself, Mark? Are you finding the creative is important, or is it branding that's important?
I do believe always creative it needs to be prominent, and it needs to connect with the viewer itself. I always believe that when doing advertising, we need to create meaningful commercials in order to connect with our audience, and again, provide realistic advertising itself, and for them to purely understand and to even speak about the brand organically, like we work on SEO, but even then from a public side itself.
Okay, so you're trying to create great ads, but let's say you put a few duds out there. Are you finding the duds don't work at all, or are the duds working almost as well as the great ones?
No, again, as we are saying, it falls down to which market you're working in. Like we're mentioning, in the UK, there's a sort of limit where you can get with advertising. But I would say in other markets, it's quite opportunistic. As mentioning, Brazil is going to be regulated. There's streamers, influencers speaking about sports betting brands, and multiple casinos. So it's important that we understand the market we are in, facilitate what the audience really wants, and obviously do our best in order building the best advertising for them.
So believe it or not, we've only got 1 minute left. With that, I just want to ask a top tip from each of you. If you could leave this audience knowing one thing before they go off and start to activate all of their social and all of their streaming and all of their influencer media, what would that top tip be? Dan, why don't you start?
For me, obviously, conversion's very important when you're running social ads, but I also think brand awareness is just as important, and I think you need to put both of them on the same type of level. I know you're saying owners went panic with the conversion kind of thing, but to have a successful brand to move forward, conversion's important, brand awareness is important. They both need to be the same, followed the same way.
And yeah, eventually to continue on then, I believe it's important we study the market well, do our homework well as well in what we want to achieve, highlight primary KPIs, and set the best advertising for our audience.
Dan and Mark, thank you very much. That was 15 minutes of pure entertainment and great information. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you absorbed everything that we said. And if you hadn't, I bet you there's going to be some of this on video that you could watch later. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Michael Caselli, and thanks for having us.